everyone, and welcome to another tournament review here at PMTT. As you can see in the top left-hand corner of the screen, I am joined by Paddy tonight. Paddy, how you going?
Good, mate, yourself?
Yeah, really good, really good. Just got those pre-Runax nerves, but yeah, very much looking forward to the next weekend. You're going as well, I'm pretty confident.
Yeah, I am. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, very nice. It should be a really good time. Gabe always puts on a pretty good show. But that is next weekend. We're here to talk about last weekend. So last weekend I ran the Gauntlet round 4 down at T3 Games in Burleigh. And we had 20 players. It seemed like it was a pretty good day. Everyone seemed like they had a good time. Did you enjoy the day?
I did.
Yeah, very
I always
nice.
try and make sure I enjoy myself.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, when it
Yeah,
comes down to it, it's a game between two people. If you're not having fun, what's the point?
exactly.
But throughout the course of the day, we had two undefeateds. One of the people that was undefeated came in first, and that was Brendan with his Stormcast, closely followed by Geordie with his Beast coming in second, and then Jacob picked up third with his Ogre More Tribes. In addition to that, we had Dave win another painting award for his Magmadroth Fire Slayers, and my guest tonight walked away with the Best Sports Award. I believe that's your second best sports for the this year's Gauntlet series.
It is.
Yeah, so I wanted to get him on, Paddy, on tonight to talk about kind of back-to-back best sports. Like, obviously, he's doing something right when it comes to making sure his opponents have a good time. But for those of you who haven't been to one of my events before, the tiebreaker I used for best sports, because it was actually a four-way tie at the event, which was amazing. Also, everyone got at least one best sports vote, which is just the standard of player in the community is just jumping ahead in leaps and bounds. But the tiebreaker I use is whoever does the best on the day. The theory is that if you can absolutely stomp your opponents and make them say at the end of it, "Thank you, that was an awesomely fun game," you're obviously doing something right. So that's why I've got Paddy on tonight, because he did quite well. He came sixth overall, which is a pretty big achievement. And yeah, so first up, what list did you take?
I took Nighthaunt,
Yep,
which
yeah.
is an army you don't usually see very often
Hmm.
anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're really in a really interesting spot at the moment. Walk me through your list. What was your thoughts behind it?
It was mainly on the basis of how the meta kind of is at the moment. So there's plenty of armies at the moment that sort of either deal in high bodies or are more of elite, but then have like high rend, um, less attacks but high damage. So Nighthaunt kind of fit that niche where they're very good against hordes because they generally have a lot of attacks. But they also are very good against your more elite style armies,
Hmm.
just on the basis of the fact that they're ethereal. So most of your high rend stuff doesn't really matter. And then also the fact that there's just enough like debuffs in the army that when they have to fight something that's fairly elite, all the debuffs that they can apply to said unit usually ends up them dying quite quickly. So,
Yeah.
um, and then obviously being Nighthaunt, they just have lots of bodies themselves. So I just went on that sort of basic principle, because I thought they were in a pretty good spot in the meta, and yeah, they did well.
Yeah. No, really cool. Like I know the list that I'm playing at the moment, my Sylvaneth. I think it would really struggle into a Nighthaunt list, especially one that it was built like the way yours was. So give us a bit more of a deep dive. Like, what exactly kind of did you take? I know you had Lady Olinda.
Well, I did. I went down the Banshee route. I went down and took as many sort of Banshees as I could, just little lady ghosts. So I
Yeah.
took Lady Olinda, and like what I call the trifecta, which is the three heroes that you always see in a Nighthaunt list, which is usually a Cruelgast Excruciator, a Guardian of Souls, and a Spirit Torment.
Yep.
Of obvious reasons, the Cruelgast stops damage, the Spirit Torment heals and brings back models, and the Guardian of Souls is just also heals and also is a bit of a buff piece as well. And then Lady Olinda at the moment is just generally quite good. But then I just took 50 Dreadside Paradins.
Yep.
So a unit of 20 and 3 units of 10. And then I took 16 Mirrormorn Banshees with
Yeah.
an Emerald Life Swarm.
Yeah. So
So plenty of magic defense, it's plenty of bodies. It's quite tough to remove just because of all the debuffs that it's got. And then it's just lots of bodies, lots of attacks.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, well, it seemed to work fairly well on the table. Like you went 2-1 overall, which is always a decent result at a 3 round event. So your first round opponent was Scott, who was running his Daughters of Cain. So he had Big Marathi and Little Marathi, and
yeah,
Iron Scale, and then an absolutely massive unit of Bow Snakes.
yeah.
Um, Walk me through that game. It was Spring the Trap. How did that all
Yeah.
unfold?
The game just it was just about me trying to remove Marathi off the table as fast as I could, so she wasn't able to double shoot the snakes that often. And then due to all the healing I have in my list, I had an arcane piece of terrain on my side of the board, which meant all my wizards that were basically parked around it got the +1 to cast, which negates Marathi's +1. So I was able to get most of my spells off for the most part. There was a couple of times where it didn't because of primal dice. But it was healing, bringing back models. I've got a command trait that lets me bring back a summon unit on a 4-up. Like there was just lots of. I got shot basically for 3 full turns, but I was holding objectives. So, I mean, it worked out. It was just an attrition game, and eventually I won because the doc couldn't handle like they that kind of dock list doesn't have a lot of models in it. So
Yeah, yeah, you just kind of just outgrinded them with all your healing, and even though Scott's list, can put out a tremendous amount of damage, if you're healing almost as much damage as he's doing, then you're going to win the long game. So,
well that and also like you can like things like Marathi's heart render and stuff like that with a high rend. You're playing Nighthaunt, you're ethereal, you don't care. It and all the damage that she does gets dropped by 1. So
mm,
there's a lot of ways of just negating a lot of that damage and watering it down.
yep,
So
yeah, yeah. So you won that game.
I did. Yeah.
So one up, which is a good spot to be. I always find the first game of the tournament kind of sets the tone for the day. Um, and I know whenever I walked past, you guys looked like you were having an absolutely fantastic time. Just the trash talk going back and forth was hilarious. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. I always trash talk everybody that I play against. I've got no problems doing that whatsoever.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
So what trash talk did you throw out in round 2 against Geordie with his beasts? Were you just making fun of him having a thing for
In
goats,
general, I
or
was just saying whenever I asked him because I've never played against the new Beastmen at all. So this is a game that I lost, but I've never played any new Beast. So when I was asking him about all these rules, and when he was trying to tell me like all how the stuff about how he's army, and I was like, that just sounds made up. Um, and every single time I'm like, are you sure? Is that exactly how that works? And he'd be like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. And I'm like, sounds made up to me, man. I don't think that's how that works. So it was just constant things like that back and forth all the time. So, but yeah, I ended up playing Geordies and I lost that game, but I learned a lot. So
yep,
he won't be doing what he did against him. He won't be doing what he did against me that game again. So
yep, yeah? And
yeah,
Beast has such a unique play style compared to a lot of the other popular factions that are out at the moment. So,
their playstyle is what I would call keep away.
mm,
Their whole like their army is pretty squishy. So when you do get in, they kind of die very quickly. So they have a tendency of just playing a game of just like basically, keep away where they try and remove your biggest threats and then just kind of like use ungors and gore screens to basically stop the worst of it from attacking them while they're doing damage to you. So
yep,
and then with their
uh,
rituals of ruin, they
yep,
can place units outside and all that sort of stuff and put you out of position, which is exactly what happened to me. So
yep, yeah. Yeah, so you one up, one down at this point, going in around 3, and you came up against Mark with his OBR. What
yes,
was that game like?
um, it's one of those games that OBR really do struggle at the moment to play into. Just on the fact that OBR's like they're a very elite army, which is great for Nighthaunt. So
Mm,
like you end up paying a lot of points in OBR for abilities that just sort of never really get used. Because of the sub faction that I took, I ignore ward saves in combat. on all my banshees. So jumping into OBR, like they have the incredible ability of like save stacking out through out through their backside. But when their armor save's kind of 4+ base and I have no rend, it doesn't really matter.
Mm,
So you're just stacking lots of attacks into an army that's fairly elite, with all the debuffs that Ninehorn get as well. It can the game turns on the OBR very quickly. So
yeah, yeah. You're
um,
just drowning him with dice. You're not trying to put through any quality. It's
nah,
just you're gonna make 30 saves. You're gonna fail five of them. That's
yeah,
it.
yeah. You just like I'm just gonna put a whole bunch of wounds onto you. I mean, like that 20-man unit, I'd managed to buff up and it had 101 attacks at threes and threes. So
Oh, that's.
I mean, and that was one of my units. So
Mm, yeah, I know.
so yeah,
I know. I saw. I think it was in Scott's game. You had I had like the stack of debuffs next to his one of his big units that you were trying to remove. You were like, okay, you neg 3 save, you're -2 to hit, you're striking last. Oh, here's another -2 to you save, and just it's just huge when you can kind of focus fire all your units and get all your debuffs onto one thing.
yeah. It's the strength of the Nighthorn army. So
Mm,
yeah, you always got to play to your strengths. So
yeah. Yes, but 2-1 overall
yeah,
is a really good result. Like I said earlier, you came sixth, which is like out of 20 people is a very solid showing, especially with such a competitive field. A couple of people asked me kind of at the start of the day, it's like, oh, who do you pick to win? And it's just like there's 8, 9 guys here that easily could go undefeated and no one would bat an eye.
yeah, yeah. Well, one of the players I didn't want to play because we always end up playing at events. I versed round one, so
Yeah.
so it always ends up me versing Scott always at every event I've ever go to, especially when Scotty's there.
Yep.
So it's usually weird when we don't have to play each other. So
Well, at least what
um,
you can do is just never play him casually anymore because you know you'll play him at the next event. So,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly, exactly.
But the biggest takeaway from the day, from at least my perspective for you, was the objective zones that I accidentally stole from you. I returned them. I have a bad habit of selling products to people and then accidentally stealing them back because I assume they're mine.
Oh, look, don't get me wrong, it's a great sales pitch. I mean, you sell all these bits out, you take them home with you. You're like, I don't know what happened to those. I think they just disappeared. And then all of a sudden, I've got to buy more again. I mean, like, it's genius, really, if you think about it.
A good
Um,
salesman sells a solution. A great salesman sells the problem and then the
e-
solution. So,
exactly, exactly. So, yeah, yeah. Yeah. That's
uh,
why I thought I'd ask you. I was like, do you have those objectives? And yeah, anyway, yeah.
but the other thing you walked away with was the best sports trophy, which is always a huge achievement in my eyes because it's not something that you can ever plan for. It purely comes down to your performance on the day. And one of the things that has very much impressed me recently, not only back to back sports trophies, but I know that been a thing in the community that you want to be the best kind of player to play against. Like just the general level of sportsmanship in the community is rising, which is a great thing to see, which is great for new people coming in as well. But I can remember back when I first played you, the very first time I played you was about 3 years ago in the final round of the Battle Station Bash series
Yep.
that Mick and Gemma were running, little 1,000 point games.
Yep.
And I'll be honest, that game between us was first, it was the final round, and it was incredibly tense. Um, Neither of us were running very friendly lists either. I had Seraphon back then, and you were running, I believe, all Squigs.
Yep.
Um, but it was an incredibly tense game. Since then, though, I know this is definitely true for me, and this is what I wanted to ask you: is what have you done to kind of be a more relaxed and friendly player? Like, I know the list of things that I've been focusing on and trying to do is quite long, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to say, what do you think you've improved as a player, sportsmanship wise? And if so, how? What have you been doing?
I've been actively trying to not um to make sure that my opponent also enjoys the game. Um, Realistically, because it didn't help. Well, at the Battle Station Bash anyway. I usually have Mick around my tables at the best of times, and he likes to just rib into me at every 5 seconds and just watch me become the saltiest player, like almost what I would call a glass of salt. That's right, a glass of salt. But just watch me become the saltiest man that ever plays Warhammer ever. Just because if anything goes wrong, Mick just loves to give it to me.
Yeah,
So
it doesn't matter what's gone wrong. It's always your fault. If I have good dice, it's your fault. You are the
yeah,
reason that I had
exactly,
good dice.
exactly.
So
Or just anybody in general is like, sounds like a skill issue to me. So I've just generally tried to tone a lot of that back in general, and just not let things get to me, because there are moments in this game where you can run into bad matchups, or you can run into, like, sometimes there's always something to learn from a loss, or you should be trying to learn something from a loss, or what you could have done differently. It's always one thing to blame dice, but if you're constantly blaming dice, that says more about you as a player than the dice itself.
mm,
So I always try and make sure that my opponent enjoys themselves, and even if I do lose, that I'm trying to learn something from it. So
yeah,
that's that's how I try and approach the game nowadays.
yeah,
So
no, and
yeah,
it's definitely showing. Like
yeah,
you're regularly winning best sports awards. I know the last couple of times that I've played you in a tournament, we had a great game. The
yeah,
games were over incredibly quickly because that particular matchup of lists lives and dies on that 9-inch charge. Um,
yeah,
and
yeah.
even when I make it, it doesn't necessarily go my way. So
Yeah, look, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's pretty rough. It's KO versus Sylvaneth is usually not a good time for Sylvaneth at the best of times. So,
yeah,
um, yeah. So, like, when I do end up trying to play those, well, like when I do get those kind of games where I just, you sort of not feel bad for your opponent, but know they're up against it. I just try and make it a little bit easier, so it's not, it just is what it is, kind of thing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and like I can definitely say, like in those games, you deployed your army. You pretty much knew what was going to happen. You'd been in that situation enough that you know, cool. I've got every advantage here. It only
yeah,
takes one little thing to go wrong, and you're just gonna absolutely sweep me off the table. But
yeah,
even though that didn't come across in how you kind of approach the game, you're still friendly. You're still like, come on, let's do it. Let's get into it. Come on, you've got this. You've
yeah,
got this. Go for the charge. Yep. Oh no, you failed. Okay.
yeah.
So sorry about this. Have 1,000 bullets.
Yeah, have watched one 15-man squad pump out more firepower than most 2,000-point armies combined. So yeah,
Yeah.
it can create some pretty bad uh bad vibes.
Mm,
I know from playing Caradrons for as long as I have that sometimes they can make people very upset,
yeah.
because similar to Beastmen, they don't really play the game in a way. They
Mm.
just kind of sort of play a game of keep away. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I know. One of the things that I've been working on myself to be like a better opponent is a better understanding of kind of just all the general rules as well. So because I know all the rules and like I have a good understanding of how they all interact, I can focus more on just being relaxed, being a good like gracious opponent. Versus really trying to think, oh, is that right, or is that right, or have they done that right, or am I forgetting something there? So that's something that I've been working on. And the other big thing that I've really been trying to focus on recently over the past couple of months is celebrating my opponent's success. So when they make that 10-inch charge, or when they get those two sixes to cast a spell, and the unlikely things that are 100% in their favor, celebrating that with them. So
yeah. Well, I would agree with you 100%, except for one person, which is when I have to play against Dave Kerr, because that guy can die in a fire. But everybody else, yeah, that's fine. Just not that guy. So because I'll never hear the end of it.
yeah,
So
well that's okay. Everyone's allowed to have a nemesis. And that's it.
yeah,
Like I've got some players that you play them, you know it's going to be a good game, but you just want to beat them just that extra little bit, and yeah. But
yeah,
that's one thing that I've been focusing on to try and be a more gracious opponent is to celebrate the wins that my
yeah,
opponents get, not just like and then just get really salty and kind of like, yeah, well you only won that game because you made that 12-inch charge. And no, it's like, no, you played well, you took the long shot, you went for the throat, you pulled it off, you got it, you got the win because of it. So
yeah.
Yeah. No, excellent. So thank you very much for coming on tonight. I know we're recording this one just before Runax, which I
Yep.
know we are both excited for. And I'm actually only a couple of minutes away from jumping on with the rest of my team to talk through some of our strategies. So we'll wrap it up there because I know that we're both kind of really looking forward to it. What prep are you doing for Runex at the moment, or are you like 100% on top of it all?
Most of my prep usually involves a little a little something something. So look, I'll show you my prep for it. It's pretty intense.
Yep. Everyone take notes now. Okay.
Mhm.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
No.
yeah. So it's pretty intense. Just imagine that, except for it's beer. That's basically what the because when I go to Runax, I generally don't take it very seriously. I know there's a lot of teams, or there's a fair few teams that take it seriously. I generally don't. It's usually for me a chance just to play some Warhammer and usually drink a lot of beer, maybe usually too much beer, to the point where I might cover a urinal in my own vomits. But like I generally just go out there to try and have a good time, and I'm not really particularly too worried about any of that sort of stuff. And I've been playing Warhammer now for way too long, so like I'm more worried about enjoying myself more than anything else. So
Yeah, and like that's a great thing to do to like pick a couple of tournaments or pick a tournament and just consciously take a step back, take the pedal, like take the gas off a bit, and just roll dice, play hammers, and have fun. So and don't be kind of worrying about what's the opportune move at any given moment. It's just you're rolling dice with some friends. It's going to be a great time. I'm really looking forward to it. It's one of the kind of the big events that I try and make every year. It's an extreme sport to get a ticket, so we've definitely got to talk to Gabe about that. So,
geez, isn't it ever? Holy hell! I mean, you've literally got to be on the like right on the button at the point of the release. So
yeah, I
yeah,
think it was something like 4.5 seconds or something, and it was sold out.
yeah,
Like a ridiculous time. But that is just a massive compliment to Gabe and the tournament that he puts on. So,
yep,
but we'll leave it there. I'm definitely looking forward to catching up with you at the weekend as well.
yep,
Everyone else, hopefully you've enjoyed this video and us just talking about how to try and be nicer people. I know it's something that I have to consciously think about and try and achieve because I'm not the nicest person sometimes. So Paddy is a lot nicer than me. He doesn't have to try as hard, but it's still something that everyone has to try hard at. So,
we'll see, we'll see. Yeah, yeah.
but thanks for coming on tonight, man. And
No worries.
we'll see everyone next time.
All right, all good.
Bye.
Bye.